Welcome to The Debate. Today we are diving deep into let's call them risky but potentially necessary strategic choices Kia is making with its flagship SUV. We're talking about the 2027 Kia Telluride, which we've just gotten a glimpse of through some official teaser photos. Now, the first generation Telluride was this huge, almost surprising global success, right? A lot of that built on its looks handsome, sure, but kind of soft-edged, approachable.
Mm-hmm.
But the new material confirms a pretty radical pivot. That predecessor's rounded-off styling, gone, replaced by what they're calling a much brawnier, squared-off look with some totally new visual cues.
And that sudden shift, that dramatic change is exactly what we need to dig into. I mean, when your first try basically defines a segment, gets huge sales based on a very specific, very approachable look, just tossing that formula out wholesale, that carries enormous risk.
Absolutely. So our central question today really is this move towards a, let's say, geometrically sharper, more muscular design a necessary strategic step forward, a way to, reassert its presence and stay competitive? Or, as you're suggesting, does this really radical redesign risk pushing away the very customers who love the original and kind of diluting the identity that made it so compelling in the first place?
Yeah, and I'll be arguing that this aggressive stylistic change brings in a lot of uncertainty. Questions about consistency across the lineup, how the market's actually going to react, and, frankly, the real functional value behind some of these new design features.
And I'm going to argue that these big changes are actually vital for the Telluride's long-term relevance. It's about establishing a necessary, really distinct visual identity that shores up its premium position, especially, as Kia keeps pushing the whole brand a bit more upscale. So let's start with that new shape itself.
Okay, well, I come at it from maybe a different angle. The original Telluride, its success came from this kind of relaxed, almost refined vibe, didn't it? It wasn't trying to be some hardcore off-road and a Jeep or something.
Right.
The smooth lines gave it this approachable, almost kind of luxurious feel that really resonated with, say, suburban families who didn't necessarily want that super rugged image. This new geometric edge, this squared-off look, it feels like it might be abandoning that group. The old hood just sort of seamlessly, blended into the roundness of the front fenders. It was visually simple, clean. Now we've got these triangular creases, these strakes on the hood and fenders that Kia claims are inspired by the Rocky Mountains. I mean, come on. That sounds much more like a marketing story to justify adding complexity than, a genuine design need.
I see why you'd say the original softer appeal was its strength, but I'd frame the shift differently. Look, those styling cues from the first gen, they're everywhere now. They're not distinctive anymore. So this move to a more muscular appearance, it feels like a natural, even necessary evolution to stop the Telluride from just blending in. It ensures it can stand toe-to-toe visually with tougher-looking competitors like, say, the Ford Explorer or the Jeep Grand Cherokee, which really own that rugged end of the market. And those angular flares, okay, regardless of the whole mountain inspiration story, they do give the SUV a sense of character, maybe even place. It pushes the design past just generic toughness, gives the new shape a bit more dynamicism. Standing still is basically death in this market. Stagnation kills.
But that kind of geometric complexity, it often comes with the costs, right? Visually, maybe, but also literally. If you look closely at those triangular creases, that's got to be difficult stamping that into the hood and fenders. It introduces potential manufacturing costs, complexity, things a smoother old design just avoided. Does that added visual character truly justify the potential expense and honestly the risk of just making it look busy? I worry the whole look trades the first generation sort of clean sophistication for, unnecessary visual noise, maybe even design tension. Is it signaling precision? Or is it just trying a bit too hard to look tough? That kind of stylistic mixed message could confuse the very buyers who liked the effortless style of the original.
Well, the very fact that Kia seems willing to take on that manufacturing complexity, it suggests to me they're pretty confident in the aesthetic payoff. It signals they're not just doing a minor refresh, they're building a whole new visual architecture intended to carry the brand forward. A bit like the commitment we've seen with their EV line, like the EV9. And speaking of structure, that brings us nicely to maybe the most important strategic piece here, creating a distinct identity. The new lighting signature, those triple vertical front LED running lights, the source explicitly calls it a distinct Kia design signature.
Okay, and yes, that differentiation is crucial. We definitely agree that keeping it visually separate from its corporate cousin, the Hyundai Palisade, is absolutely paramount. You don't want internal competition cannibalizing sales, and you need to justify the Telluride's potentially premium pricing. And a signature has to be instantly recognizable. I'll give you that. The vertical trio, yeah, it does achieve that pretty immediately.
Exactly. This new visual cue just shouts Telluride right away, and it also, I think, reinforces Kia's broader design direction, especially when you look at the bold, kind of technical look of the EV9. This verticality feels like a strategic commitment to a bolder identity across their whole lineup.
That's a compelling point about brand synergy. But have you thought about the execution risk, especially maybe in the domestic market? Remember the last model? Key visual things like the dual power sunroof were often reserved for the higher end trims. So if Kia pulls a similar move here, and these really crucial vertical LED signatures are only on the, quote, upper variants, well then the whole strategic goal of creating a consistent visual identity kind of falls apart, doesn't it? How can it be the vehicle's signature if the person buying the base model doesn't even get it on their car? It just fractures the perception right from the entry point.
I agree. The consistency of that signature across all trims is absolutely crucial if it's going to define the Telluride. But I have some faith Kia recognizes the imperative here. Maybe they'll vary the internal complexity perhaps, dynamic sequencing on the top trims, but that fundamental triple vertical structure, I think it has to be standard to keep clear separation from Hyundai. The risk of confusing it with a future Palisade is just too high to mess with that core visual element.
That sounds optimistic. Trim strategy is often driven by profit margins, let's be honest, not always pure design consistency. If they limit that signature, it just becomes an aesthetic tax for those who can afford it, not really a shared identity for the model.
Okay, let's move beyond the exterior jewelry for a moment and talk function. I want to focus on the promised functional benefit of the new design. Specifically, that floating roof thing, achieved with the blacked-out D-pillar and that large rear glass panel. Kia explicitly says this is meant to help natural light reach the second and third rows. Now that shows a commitment to the actual passenger experience inside, moving beyond just how it looks on the outside, and it helps justify that push towards premium territory.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that it's purely functional. Or maybe that the functional value outweighs the potential downsides. Let me explain why. That increased glass area, especially up on the roofline, that brings engineering trade-offs. You've got potentially more heat getting into the cabin, right? Making the AC work harder.
Okay.
And you also have to think about structural rigidity. The D-pillar is pretty critical for torsional stiffness, roof strength for things like roof racks. Adding a blacked-out piece just to look like it's floating or making the glass bigger, that usually means compromising structural integrity or adding costly reinforcements somewhere else.
But look at the intent making the passenger experience better. That aligns perfectly with the strategy of nudging the Telluride more upscale, doesn't it? Offering better cabin experiences, like more natural light. That's how you succeed in that space. They seem to be thinking about the whole journey for the people inside.
Perhaps. But the source material itself throws cold water on that functional claim, highlighting the uncertainty. What we don't know is if this will be standard across all trims or if this feature will be limited to the Telluride's upper variants. So if making the cabin brighter is a core, fundamental goal for passenger well-being, well then limiting it just to the expensive models makes it mostly an aesthetic trick, doesn't it? A sales differentiator, yeah, but not really a foundational design improvement for all buyers. A true functional evolution would be standard, baked in across the board.
Look, even if it starts as an upper trim feature, it sets the aspirational tone for the whole model line. It signals where the vehicle is heading. I think the design team has successfully created an exterior that looks more expensive, more capable, and crucially, strategically different from its rivals, including the Palisade. That squared-off shape, the bold hood creases, and that distinctive vertical LED signature, together, they guarantee the 2027 Telluride has the visual punch it needs to stay relevant for years.
Well, I have to conclude, Ben, while the design is certainly assertive, that radical break from the previously successful, approachable style, it introduces significant market risk. The justifications for some style choices, like the whole Rocky Mountain thing for the creases, they lean a bit too heavily on marketing narratives rather than just pure design logic, I think. And critically, this underlying uncertainty about whether key visual and functional elements, like the lighting signature, like the floating roof, will actually be standard on all trims, it suggests Kia is risking confusing its market appeal by potentially failing to deliver a consistent, unified identity right from the base model up. It's a bold refresh, yes, but its success really hinges on whether they execute it consistently across the entire lineup.
The design evolution is confident, it's assertive, it signals a move into a more technical, more premium, and visually impactful space. The evidence, I believe, points to a strategic need for this kind of differentiation and muscle. So while we clearly disagree on the risk level of this pretty radical shift, I think we can agree the new Telluride's design has definitely hit its first target. It's got people talking, generating real scrutiny and debate, which says something about the significance of the changes they've made.
Indeed. And a full understanding of how it's all executed, clarification on which bits are standard equipment, that'll only come with the full reveal. That's Automobility LA 2025, November 20th. Until then, the debate over necessity versus risk, it definitely continues.